Alright, so picture this. You're creeping along in the shadows, being the biggest threat you can possibly be. All of a sudden, you run into this right here. What do? You can sneak on by and mind your damn business because you don't know what this inhuman looking monstrosity is capable of, so you'd rather not gamble your life away. Or two, you charge head on and ignore that you're a glass cannon that's meant to club people over the head and realize that's not a good strategy when they see you coming from a mile away. If it wasn't obvious already, we're talking about stealth in horror games. Parentheses because we're not strictly talking about just horror games. When you think of stealth in horror games, the first thing that likely comes to mind is that feeling of helplessness. The tension is at its peak when you're stripped away of any real means to fight back. You're not the predator, you're the prey. And the only way to survive is to stay hidden. In Alien Isolation, stealth is not just a gameplay choice, it's essential for survival in a terrifying environment where you are hunted by a relentless predator. Set on the decrepit space station Sevastopol, the game immerses you in a constant battle of wits against the iconic xenomorph. The game's design brilliantly uses stealth to create an atmosphere of unrelenting fear. The xenomorph is a unique and terrifying antagonist. Unlike typical horror game enemies, it doesn't follow predictable patterns. It stalks the station with a seemingly random but always menacing presence. This unpredictability keeps you perpetually on edge. You're never truly safe, and the constant tension of potentially encountering the alien adds a profound layer of fear. Stealth in Alien Isolation involves more than just hiding in shadows. It's about using every tool at your disposal to avoid detection. You'll need to craft and use noisemakers, distractions and stuff like that, and hide in lockers to avoid the xenomorph's search and gaze, all that. There is obviously lethal weaponry in the game, but those are more for the human and android enemies. They're not as big a threat as the xenomorph are, but still, nonetheless, you're not going to waste your resources on the little fish. The game also employs a sophisticated sound system where the alien's movements are sometimes hinted at through audio cues. One of the most nerve-wracking aspects of Alien Isolation is its emphasis on patience and observation. The xenomorph's presence is often felt rather than seen, creating a persistent sense of dread. You have to constantly evaluate your environment, make careful decisions, and remain hidden to survive, obviously. This constant vigilance, combined with the alien's unpredictable behavior, transforms stealth into a gripping survival experience. In essence, Alien Isolation uses stealth to elevate the horror experience to new heights. The constant fear of being hunted by a creature that is both intelligent and unpredictable makes every encounter a high-stakes test of nerves and strategy. Stealth is not just a mechanic here, it's the key to navigating an environment where danger is always looming. In Outlast, stealth is not just a gameplay mechanic, it's a lifeline in a world where danger lurks around every corner. Set in the grim and foreboding Mount Massive Asylum, the game throws you into the role of investigative journalist Miles Upshur, armed only with a night vision camera. This lack of combat and reliance on stealth creates a uniquely terrifying experience. What makes Outlast so harrowing is the sense of constant vulnerability. The asylum is filled with deranged inmates and malevolent forces, and every encounter with them is a reminder of your powerlessness. The game's design forces you to avoid confrontation and rely on stealth to navigate the dark, claustrophobic halls of the asylum. The night vision camera is both a tool and a source of anxiety. While it allows you to see in the dark, it also requires precious batteries that deplete quickly, leaving you in pitch darkness when they run out. This creates a tense balancing act. You need to use the camera to stay hidden and find your way, but doing so risks running out of battery and being left vulnerable. The fear in Outlast doesn't come just from the grotesque enemies or the horrifying scenarios, but from the ever-present threat of detection. You must sneak past, hide in lockers, and move silently through the asylum, knowing that one wrong move could lead to a chase or a gruesome end. The game amplifies this fear by making you constantly aware of your surroundings and the dangers that could be lurking just out of sight. In Outlast, stealth is used to heighten the sense of dread and helplessness. The asylum's dark corners and relentless enemies make every step a calculated risk, creating a nerve-wracking experience where the fear of being caught is ever present. Amnesia. A lot of games owe a lot to this one right here. It's extremely simple in hindsight, but it works so well. There is a reason this game is responsible for popularizing the Let's Play video on YouTube way back in the ancient year of 2010. When it comes to stealth in horror games, Amnesia: The Dark Descent stands out as a prime example of how the lack of combat can amplify the fear of being hunted. In Amnesia, you play as Daniel, a man who wakes up in a dark, foreboding castle with no memory of how he got there. The game thrusts you into a world where stealth is not just a strategy, but a necessity for survival. One of the most unnerving aspects of Amnesia is its use of darkness and sound to create a palpable sense of dread. The game's light mechanics are deliberately sparse. Your only source of light is a lantern that needs to be carefully managed. Running out of oil means plunging into pitch black darkness, where every creak, every whisper, or every distant thud becomes a potential threat. But something else you need to worry about is also the dark, as the enemies aren't the only antagonistic force in the game. The longer you hide in the darkness, the more sanity you lose, which if you've played the game, you'll know how that goes. Thus, creating this balancing act of hiding and willingly exposing yourself in order to survive, increasing the tension tenfold. The monsters you encounter are relentless and terrifying, but what's truly horrifying is the fear of encountering them. Since you can't fight back, you must rely on hiding and evading to survive. The game forces you to think strategically, making every sound you make, every corner you turn, a potential trigger for a horrifying encounter. This constant fear of detection, coupled with the psychological impact of exploring an abandoned, haunted castle, makes stealth an integral part of the horror. The tension in Amnesia is not just about the monsters you see, but also about the ones you don't, creating an atmosphere where every moment is fraught with uncertainty and anxiety. In essence, Amnesia: The Dark Descent turns the act of sneaking into a nerve-wracking experience. The game's ability to make the unknown feel so threatening demonstrates how stealth mechanics can be used to create an overwhelming sense of fear and vulnerability. While it's not the most mechanically complex, nor is it the first horror game of its kind, it serves as an example of what horror mixed with stealth at its base core can do. But here's the thing, you don't need a horror game to feel that same sense of dread while sneaking around. Plenty of non-horror games use stealth to create moments that are just as intense, where the fear of being spotted can leave your heart racing. The stakes might not be as gruesome as being torn apart by a monster, but the anxiety is still very real. Man, oh man, I remember playing this game to death on my PS2 way back in the day. I think I played every level at least a dozen or so times, that's how much. In my opinion, this is the best implementation of stealth in a video game so far. You're probably also wondering, hey, this isn't even a horror game at all. Yeah, you're right about that, but remember, it's not about what the genre is, but how the game can make you feel. Splinter Cell Chaos Theory masterfully blends stealth mechanics with psychological tension to create a gripping experience. One notable example is The Lighthouse, which effectively uses its environment and gameplay mechanics to evoke a deep sense of unease. Set in a desolate, rain-soaked lighthouse, the mission's atmosphere is both visually striking and psychologically unsettling. The constant downpour, combined with the dim lighting and reflective puddles, creates a claustrophobic and disorienting environment. The rain and darkness obscure vision and enhance the feeling of isolation, making the environment itself a source of tension. The game's stealth mechanics are key to building this psychological pressure. As Sam, you must carefully navigate through the level, avoiding detection while dealing with highly alert guards. The game's advanced AI reacts dynamically to your actions, heightening the fear of making a mistake. Every shadow and corner could hide a potential threat, and the need for precise, deliberate movements adds to the tension. Infiltrating the well-guarded compound within the mission further amplifies the psychological strain. Guards will investigate suspicious sounds, search for intruders, and communicate with each other, creating a web of vigilance that keeps you on edge. The constant threat of discovery, combined with the complex environment and reactive AI, makes every step a high-stakes decision. Overall, Chaos Theory uses its stealth mechanics and atmospheric design to create a compelling experience where the psychological tension is as crucial as the gameplay itself. The fear of being detected and the pressure to remain hidden are heightened by the game's immersive environment and intelligent enemy behaviors, making for a truly gripping stealth experience. And yeah, like I said, this isn't a horror game, and it's fine, it doesn't have to be. It's how it makes you feel, and I wasn't scared playing this game, obviously. That's not the emotion you should be feeling anyway, but it's those moments where you're stealthing your way around these enemies and these super tight hallways, those really close encounters where you can pretty much almost kiss them. I think it's these moments in these types of games where you're scared of just being detected. You know, it's just that fear. It's what comes afterwards. You can deal with it as Sam. Like, there's no doubt about it. You can definitely eliminate enemies if they're on alert. You have that ability. But again, it's these moments right here where you just want to get by without being detected. And I think this game does a pretty good job of that. Almost the entire Splinter Cell series, it does this very well. So yeah, that's why it's on this. I wanted to throw this one in here simply because it terrified me as a kid. I was only ever to get through this level after watching my brothers play through it, and even then, that was too much for me to handle. In Tenchu, Breath of Heaven, the cemetery level stands out as a chilling example of how stealth can be intertwined with horror to create an intense, nerve-wracking experience. Set in a desolate graveyard shrouded in darkness, the environment is filled with crumbling tombstones, eerie statues, and shadowy crypts. This desolate setting contributes to a sense of isolation and dread, with ambient sounds like distant howls and unsettling creaks enhancing the eerie atmosphere, and of course, the soundtrack. It just pushes it up to 11 if you ask me. One of the most notable horror aspects of this level is its use of supernatural elements. As you stealthily navigate through the cemetery, you encounter apparitions and undead creatures. These enemies are not visually disturbing, but also add a layer of supernatural menace to the gameplay. The presence of these entities heightens the feeling of being in a place where the boundary between the living and the dead is dangerously thin. The stealth mechanics in the cemetery level are designed to amplify the horror experience. The narrow, labyrinthine paths between tombstones and hallways provide limited cover, making it challenging to avoid detection. The game's use of shadows and minimal lighting in the cemetery creates a claustrophobic atmosphere where danger feels ever present. Every sound, from the rustling of leaves to the distant groans of the undead, keeps you on edge, making each step a calculated risk. The encounters in this level are deliberately designed to be unsettling. The appearance of undead enemies and ghostly figures not only adds a horror element, but also creates a constant sense of threat. The unexpected nature of these encounters, coupled with the need to avoid them while remaining stealthy, contributes to a heightened state of anxiety and fear. The psychological horror in the cemetery level is enhanced by its design and the nature of the enemies. The combination of a creepy setting, supernatural threats, and the need for precise stealth creates a high-stakes environment where every moment is fraught with tension. The fear of encountering something horrifying around every corner, coupled with the constant pressure to remain undetected, makes this level a standout example of stealth horror. Looking back at it now, as a kid, this was utterly terrifying to me. I just couldn't explain how scary it was. It was the scariest thing to me. It still unsettles, but I think that's just the mood of these Tenchu games. All the way from the first one to Wrath of Heaven. There's a couple others in between there as well, but all of these games just have like this uncanniness to them. The stealth in this game is utterly simple. It's just the type of, can the enemy see you? Yes or no, and that's it. There's no hiding in bushes or hiding in shadows. It's just you're either behind something where they can't see you or they see you. And there's a lot of moments in these types of games where it's just kind of scary. Although Thief Deadly Shadows is not a traditional horror game, its stealth mechanics and eerie atmosphere create some of the most nerve-wracking moments in gaming. Set in a dark, medieval steampunk-inspired world, you play as Garrett, a master thief who must stay hidden while navigating shadowy streets, dimly lit castles, and dangerous strongholds. Now, let me tell you, I played this game as a kid who had no, and I mean absolutely no introduction to this series aside from this game at the time. Fair to say that this game creeped me out most of the playthrough. I think what really added to the creep factor was the jankiness of it. It's not a bug-ridden unplayable mess, but you'll notice it if you play it. The animation seems sort of stiff, and the voice acting at times can be silly, I guess that's the best way I can put it.
How's it going, Sinclair? Not bad, I guess. Only... What? Let me guess. You got a bad feeling about tonight, right? I've got the heebie-jeebies, something awful. I feel like there's someone watching me, even now. Boo. Ah! Hey! Now what'd you do that for? Back to work, you taffer.
In my opinion, that doesn't really take away from the game, so rest assured if you want to play, you won't be disappointed. The game starts out somewhat grounded in reality too, especially if you've never played the other two games, like myself. You don't expect this game to throw zombies and stone people at you. There's more creepiness, but that was just the first things to come to my mind, and my god is it creepy. Combine all of that together and you almost get something that most horror games can't get right. Atmosphere.
The idea to disobey my orders.
Yes, Mistress Mastiff.
Well, be...
Again, just like the last two entries in this video, I played this around the same time as Chaos Theory, so as a child, that of course enhanced the horror elements in this game for me. Not that you wouldn't feel these feelings of fear and unease now, the game does a good job of that either way. But we're talking about stealth, and the power of Thief lies in its ability to merge stealth with horror elements. The game doesn't rely on jump scares or gore. Instead, it uses isolation and uncertainty to build tension. The fear comes from knowing you're vulnerable, sneaking through an environment where danger feels ever present, yet hidden. The stealth mechanics force you to be deliberate, and cautious, intensifying every moment where you're out of sight but never quite safe. For a majority of the game, you spend it sneaking around the usual castle, tavern, stronghold, etc. Most of that doesn't feel off, aside from the fear of being caught. The voice acting in this game adds that element of unease, whether intentional or not, and as you go through the game, things start getting weirder and stranger. We start getting a glimpse of horror-ish elements like zombies and these pagan enemies. I think where the game starts to show you what it can do is the abysmal gale. You hear about it, and it eventually becomes a mission of its own. When you finally board the ship though, you see it and you hear it. There's zombies, and now all of a sudden you're in a horror game. The setup for this mission is also pretty cool too. A captain takes his crew to retrieve this golden slab, and now weird things are happening on the ship. We don't need a whole lot to go on though. As we enter the ship, we pretty much see exactly what's going on. This part made me sweat as a kid. It's short, so it's not a long trudge through the ship, but as a first time player into the series, you're in for a slow burn. It's great though, because you don't know if you can kill these things. Spoiler, you can, but they take a lot of damage, so you're best just sneaking around. Overall, I think this mission shows you what you can expect from the rest of the game, and the series as a whole. There aren't a lot of moments like this, but it doesn't need them, as now you're fully expecting things to get weird and creepy even in the more grounded levels. And then we get to the impending doom that is the Shellbridge Cradle. I believe you hear NPCs talking about it, and you read about it throughout the whole game, and when you finally get it, it's not a disappointing experience. This level, right here, takes everything I've talked about and mixes it nicely into a single level. Like I said, this game is not a horror game, but it excels at that aspect. You're not a master thief here. You're not anyone. It's just you, the orphanage, the dark, and some goodies mixed in. I mean, look at this. And this. You can fight back, just so you know, but again, it's not worth the waste of equipment since they take a good amount of, I think, almost anything. But that isn't the point, and I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have enough for all of them anyway. This level right here, along with the rest of the game, might be the best representation of stealth gameplay and horror elements combined. I'm sure there are other examples that fit the bill, but to me, this is it. It's always these one-off moments in games that do the best in another genre. It's crazy. There's also the part where, again, we hear about this mysterious boogeyman or boogie woman, the hag, all throughout the game.
About a crone that talks to statues.
Thou hast seen the hag?
Not just seen. She tried to kill me.
We have to make our way around them after they've morphed into this grotesque abomination. This is essentially the end of the game, and the game wants you to use all that you've learned, so this part shouldn't be as scary. But again, we don't really want to be caught by this thing, so of course we're gonna wait a couple business days to sneak around them. All of that is to say that Thief Deadly Shadows, while not perfect, is a masterclass at creating these tense moments that are deeply rooted in the stealth genre. And that isn't to say that games that are primarily horror that use stealth elements suck at, horror or stealth, but I find games like Thief that, again, they're not horror games, they're not even classified as horror games. When they do moments like this, it's, to me, in my opinion, it's always a bit more scarier than actual horror games. And I think it really only applies to Thief anyway, so yeah. So what's the common thread here? Stealth, by its very nature, taps into primal fears. The fear of being hunted, of being exposed, of having no escape. Whether it's a horror game or not, the act of sneaking around, staying hidden, and planning your every move taps into those same psychological triggers. Horror games often amplify this with supernatural threats and unsettling atmospheres, but non-horror games, they rely on the inherent tension of the gameplay itself. Sneaking past guards or infiltrating enemy bases can feel just as terrifying when you know a single mistake could lead to failure. But why does stealth make us feel so tense and anxious, especially in horror games? It all comes down to psychology. At its core, stealth plays on two powerful human emotions: vulnerability and the fear of the unknown. When you're hiding or sneaking, you're at your most vulnerable. You're actively avoiding danger, knowing that you're outmatched. This taps into our primal instincts, the same ones our ancestors relied on to survive. In these moments, you feel exposed, like prey trying to avoid a predator. Your brain becomes hyper-aware of your surroundings, scanning for threats, heightening your sense of fear and anticipation. This is amplified in horror games because they add uncertainty. You often don't know exactly where the enemy is, what they're capable of, or when they might strike. This lack of control is unnerving. Horror thrives on this uncertainty, turning the act of sneaking into a game of high-stakes survival. The fear of being caught, combined with the unknown consequences of that moment, triggers our fight or flight response. Even though the danger is virtual, our brains react as if it's real. That's why stealth in horror games feel so terrifying. We're wired to fear the very things these games simulate. And that's why it also makes stealth in non-horror games just as scary. Stealth as a mechanic works across genres to evoke that familiar feeling of tension. Whether you're trying to escape a monster in Amnesia or sneak past enemy soldiers in Metal Gear Solid, that fear of being discovered, of being vulnerable, is universal. So next time you're going sneaky beaky in a game, remember, even if you're not playing a horror game, the fear is still there. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching this. I've been a big fan of stealth games and horror games for a really long time now, and it's just those two types of genres that really blend well together. They, naturally mix together. After I made the last video, Isolation in Games, it's when the idea just popped into my head. But with all that being said, again, thank you so much for watching. I think as of right now, I'm sitting around 103 subscribers as I'm recording this video, so again, it's not a high number with the amount of subscribers people have these days. It's something to celebrate for, so thank you so much for subscribing. If you like the video, let me know, comment down below, subscribe, do whatever you want. But again, for the third time, I keep saying this, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, whatever that's going to be about. So, peace out.